Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's the 22nd of December 2019. Get real close to Christmas around here. I'm going to work on this Honda Welder. I've done previous videos where I bought this thing real cheap, got it running, had some fuel system issues, and quite honestly, I've been still struggling with fuel system issues. And I'll go over briefly what I've been experiencing. Basically, it's had a factory gasoline shutoff assembly, and that is located here. It's a sediment bowl, and then up here it's got like a solenoid valve, shuts the thing off. And that whole assembly was apparently not working. So I'd bought this shutoff valve, which is kind of hanging around the wires at this point. And I thought, okay, that's just going to solve the problem. And I was running the generator, it seemed to be running all right. Then pretty soon it started like it was starving for fuel. And I get kind of frustrated with this thing, and I just let it sit for a while. Then I think about it, and I go, what's probably happening is this thing doesn't flow like it ought to. This being a gravity, the gas tank's up here, so as gravity flows down through here, you can see I got some Mickey Mouse stuff going on here when I was experimenting, but there isn't enough pressure to gravity push fuel through this valve quick enough to keep the carburetor fed. So I thought I would try and put an electric fuel pump in the line here, then put the valve, and then a filter, which a filter is not a good idea for gravity feed either. You should use like a screen, and then onto the carburetor. What's probably going to happen is it'll be too much pressure. I bought the lowest PSI, it's like 1 to 3 PSI fuel pump, but it's probably still going to be too much pressure, and it might push too much fuel pressure, and maybe the needle and seat won't hold on the engine. I'm not sure, but let's find out. Let me just put all this stuff in place. There's really not too much to see. You can see how I'm going to do it. I hope that the circuit that turns on the fuel solenoid is sufficient enough to drive the fuel pump. It does have fuses there, and it looks like 5 amp is the smallest fuse, so should be of adequate capacity to run a fuel pump, I'm guessing. So let me put all that stuff in place, and we'll see if I'm on the right track. So we're kind of experimenting a little bit today. I'm hoping that this works, so this could be just a nice reliable generator or welder. This thing does have a 4,000 watt generator as part of its assembly here, and then 170 amp arc welder gasoline. And this thing is as quiet as it could be for a gasoline-powered welder. It's the quietest one I've ever heard. Been on many construction sites with gasoline-powered welders, and they're obnoxiously noisy in comparison to this. It's a pretty nice machine. So let me get to putting some parts in this thing. All right, we got everything mounted and plumbed, temporarily anyway. I got to work some hoses on and get some clamps on. And for the moment, I'll just hook up a jumper wire. Like this. Alright, fuel pump's running. Give it a moment. Shut the eco throttle off. It'd take a minute to warm up, probably. Or I turned the eco throttle on, rather. While it's warming up, I'll show you close up here. a real good place to mount that stuff either. It's probably going to be tie wrap city. It's running good. Put you back on the stand for a minute. Well, I think concept is pretty good. I actually bought 2 of those fuel pumps because I was actually having similar issues with my Cushman truckster sitting there. We were fiddling with that the other day, and I'm going to put an electric fuel pump on that. Alright, well, let me more permanently attach things and see about getting the wiring plugged in. All that stuff, and I'll catch you in a minute. Alright, got all the fuel lines put on good. Made the electrical connections permanently. I grabbed a light real quick. The circuit that used to release the fuel, the factory fuel solenoid, I reused that for the fuel pump and the new fuel solenoid. One thing to note, if you're working on one of these, that circuit doesn't come on until you hit the start, and then it stays on. So it didn't release the fuel as you turned the key on. It might have been one of the things I was fighting when I was troubleshooting this, because I just figured that out. So when you turn the key on, it doesn't release the fuel, doesn't turn the fuel pump on until you begin to crank. Okay, so you're going to be fuel pump on only when cranking, and then as it runs, it'll obviously stay on. Alright, so factory wiring's in, all the clamps are in, hoses are tight, no leaks. Let's try it again. It usually takes you just a minute or less to kind of warm up. But it'll kind of put that surge in. If I were to leave the eco throttle off, it would rev it up a little more and it would just run correctly. It's doing a little more than it has been. Come on, smooth out. That's not good. This is the same thing I've been fighting since I've got this thing. Let me fiddle with it some more. Alright, here's what I think's actually going on with this generator after the morning's messing with it. I'm losing the power when I believe when I first started working on this, when I turned the switch to on, that fuel solenoid opened. and I would run the generator. Some I'd run it for hours, and then all of a sudden it would starve for fuel. And I'm thinking, I thought that the original fuel shutoff was defective, and that's why I put the other one on. I put the other one on, and it would run for a little bit, and then once again would starve for fuel. So I thought, okay, that I need to push fuel through that fuel shutoff, so I added a fuel pump. And I ran it on jumper lead straight to the battery and showed you guys that, yeah, it run fine. Get it all put back together, plug it back into the factory wiring again. It had fuel in the carburetor and all that stuff, and then it run fine. So I went ahead and finalized all the wiring, all the clamps and everything, put the thing back together, and now it starts for fuel again. And now I've realized what's happening is I lose the fuel pump while it's running. So that either the switch, which is probably what's going on, is the ignition switch itself is losing the contact that turns that fuel on while it's running. So probably, if I go back, probably everything I've ever done didn't need to be done, and probably it's been the fault of the ignition switch the whole time. I just didn't realize that, because it does work, and then it would like go away. I think what I'm going to dig into is there's a couple other fuses in here, tucked in over here. I'm going to look at those one more time, make sure they come on with the light, and maybe tie a relay into that and hook the relay to the battery to turn the fuel pump and fuel shutoff on, using a different circuit of the ignition switch. It's getting really complicated in there, a whole bunch of stuff, and just to get it to function like it's supposed to and make it, whole for the winter. And then maybe another day I'll come and take all this stuff out and hook the old one back up to that relay, because it may actually work. It did work, and then it quit. But it's probably not the original fuel shutoff that was the problem. It was probably this switch the whole time. This is one of those gremlins that I just keep putting this thing aside and getting back to it. But it is wintertime, and I do want to get all the generators fully functioning in case, got to put some into service or need to, sell one to somebody or loan one to somebody, all that jazz. So let me try it. I'm going to tap into another circuit here, throw a relay in it, turn these, the pump and the solenoid on via a different circuit, and maybe that'll be a go. I'll check back to you when I get it done. Alright, here's the little contraption that I built. I'll walk you through this so you can review this if you want to make something like this in the future. I'm going to unplug a fuse from the fuse block. I'm going to put a light or meter, because one of them is going to be hot with the fuse removed, and one of them is not. The one that is hot with the fuse removed is going to be this leg here. That way I can go through the fuse this direction and go through the fuse this direction. This fuse is simply replacing the one I've removed here. So I remove the fuse, throw it away. Plug this one back in, and now it's a fuse. Current will flow here across this fuse and down. It's the same fuse value as the one that was in it. I'm just doing this so that I can tap it. So I'm tapping the hot wire here, going through a second fuse with two wires. I'll explain that in a second. And going over here to a relay. Alright? The relay needs two things. It needs power separately, and it needs a switch leg. It needs something to activate the coil in here to turn the relay on. The relay simply allows you to switch a lot more current than a toggle switch or key switch or something is designed for. Like a starter solenoid, your switch on your dash doesn't have a wire this big coming up to it and having all the current of the starter going through the switch. It uses a solenoid, which is essentially a relay, which is essentially what this is. So I'll show you real quick how we wire up this relay. There we go, nicely focused. So it's a 30/40 amp rated relay, and you see these pins here. I'm just trying to get focused, sorry. Not sure what else I can do to get focus here. I'm just moving around. Darn it. Try black background. There we go. So down at the bottom, you have what appears to be 84 and 85. That's your coil. One side of that needs to be grounded. Okay. The other side is your switch leg. Okay. We call it switch leg. That's what's going to turn the relay on. Then you see 30, which is on the left. That will be your common or your hot wire. It's common to the normally open and normally closed relay, which is on the right. Normally open is number 87. Normally closed is 87A. Normally open means in its unenergized state, that is the connection that has been made. 30 and 87A are made now. If you activate your switch leg on 85, it will change states, it will click, and it will connect 30 and 87. So to turn on our fuel pump and fuel valve, we'll have our switch leg come on to 85. And you see that on the lower right. The lower left is grounded, makes the circuit. 30 is hot all the time, or in our case, it's hot when that fuse holder is hot, and 85 will switch it over to connect 30 and 87. The thing that I did here is that fuse that I'm removing only comes hot when the key is in the on position, which is fine for our purposes here. So I'm actually using that circuit to not only power up this relay, but to activate the switch leg. Okay? Because it doesn't have to be on if the switch isn't on. It's okay that we're using the switch to activate the relay and the switch leg at the same time. That's why I've spliced it underneath that shrink tube there. Okay, so let me replace the existing fuse with this. Then I have this, simply have a a red and white wire. This is my after relay switch leg. Takes the power, runs it through the relay, 30 or 40 amp rated contacts. We'll connect this to the fuel pump and the fuel valve. Let me put that in place. All right, try again. That fuel pump, and you can feel the valve and even hear it open and close. We're good there. Oh man, I don't think we're done yet. What the world? So the filter's full. I'm going to go back and take this valve out. I've just been fighting this thing for months, to tell you the truth. It's just one gremlin after another here. Got to get it sorted. But now I'm suspecting that valve because I've got an absolutely full fuel filter, which is before that valve, and it's just simply not getting fuel. I've suspected the valve before. I suspected the original valve prior to that. I'm just fighting gremlins. I just gotta keep swapping stuff out one at a time here until I get it sorted. But anyway, the wiring thing worked in that I now have a fuel pump all the way while it's running, and it was clearly not doing that before. So let me take that valve out of the system. Alright, here's my setup, a little closer. Fuel pump, fuel filter, shutoff valve, everything new. I've unhooked on the other side of the shutoff valve. There's the gas line going to the carburetor. Somehow or another this thing's still starving for fuel, but that filter is completely full. I turn on the key, which will turn on the fuel pump. Yeah. Drips. Are you kidding me? Drips is all I get out of that fuel valve. Dang it. Isn't this wonderful? Isn't this wonderful? Well, I guess I order another fuel valve. Will I ever get this thing done? I don't know. I guess I'm going to end this episode here and call it a fail again, and we'll come back when the fuel valve arrives and we'll install it. I do want to put a fuel valve on this thing. I do want to stop the fuel from flowing to the carburetor, so I'll go order another one. Alright gang, thanks for watching. Comment, subscribe, and you can give it a thumbs up if you want to. This is just part of diagnosing stuff when you're buying stuff like this, and we'll just keep trucking until we get it right. Thanks guys, catch you next time.